incidence will go down. It is not only associated with mortality, but the morbidity which comes with the oral cancer treatment is very huge. The disfiguration, difficulty in eating, post-radiation changes. Even if the patient survives, the patient has to struggle occupationally. Employment becomes difficult for these patients. So there are various aspects. So one must try very hard to adapt healthy lifestyles to stay away from the addictions. Education awareness among the masses, especially the youngsters, is very, very important. There, I feel we can definitely reduce 20% mortality of the cancer. In India, oral cancer, lung cancer, breast cancers, these are the cancers which are gynecological cancers. These are increasing very fast. The good thing now is that there are therapies which are coming up in a big way, and there are research plays. Can I take 5 more minutes?
Yes, don't worry.
Yeah. So what is important, the good news in cancer treatment is recently, last decade, 10 to 15 years back, when I was doing my fellowship, hardly we had no drugs. And then there was there started a revolution. The targeted therapy and subsequently immunotherapy has come up in a big way. We used to tell our lung cancer patients that you have only 6 months. Now, I have patients with lung cancer and brain metastasis whom I have treated with targeted therapy and immunotherapy, and these people are surviving beyond 8 years. Imagine a lung cancer patient with brain metastasis. This is possible in an ethical way. Many patients get newer treatment through the research, which come into practice after 10 years. But then these 10 years go for research. And many people die during this time because of lack of this treatment, because these treatments are not in the guidelines. They are in the research. We have patients who have taken immunotherapy for lung cancer in... Ganesh, the screen is visible?
Yeah, you are visible on the screen.
Yes.
Yeah, so many people have taken the immunotherapy or targeted therapy as a part of clinical research, and they are alive without disease. A simple or a small example is CAR T therapy. CAR T therapy is a cellular therapy where patients who had blood cancer, which has been treated by 10 different lines of treatment, and the patient is still failed, and the survival was in few months. And this girl first treatment happened in USA. This CAR T is a cellular therapy where the antigen is expressed on the body's immune cells externally. So what they do, they take the body's T lymphocytes and a vector, virus vector, where they insert these receptors, which actually, when goes back to the patient's body, they activate the immune systems in such a way that those tumor cells are specifically targeted by this activated immune system. And we have patients who had taken this therapy 10 years back, and after 10 years, she is living without the blood cancer. So fraction of patients can be cured, and this cure would not have been possible without doing research, clinical research. Now, coming to the fact that pediatric cancers have very high cure rate. In 1960, when the treatment for leukemia was started, the protocol started with a single drug, anti-folate metabolite, methotrexate, a drug like methotrexate, which is a folate antagonist. That time, the cure rate for pediatric leukemia was 1%. And I can proudly say today, the pediatric protocols are using multiple drugs together over a period of 2 years. And the cure rate for pediatric cancers, especially acute lymphoblastic leukemia, with good risk. Again, we have to stratify them, good and intermediate high risk. The cure rate is 98. And this is possible only because the research is carried out in a stepwise manner. I feel in recent future, if these different therapies can be now incorporated, and this is only possible by doing the research in a rapid way. Like in COVID, we faced a problem of worldwide mortality, and there were many trials. Obviously, there is going to be a criticism about the trial, how it is conducted, and Ganesh will throw a light on that. But then there are people who can control or check the way research is being done. In COVID, we know that some of the good vaccines came forward and they've saved lot many lives. Similar way, a cancer research has to go on fast track by reducing the myths about the cancer research. And because what happens in my clinical practice, if I utter a word of clinical research, you are participating in a clinical trial, many patients feel that no, the experiments are being done on them. But to tell you the fact, these newer molecules, immunotherapy molecules, when they are FDA approved, and then when they come into market, actually clinical practice, the cost is huge. For example, immunotherapy drug pembrolizumab, the cost is 5 lakh rupees for one single dose. And we have our colleagues from Tata Hospital have done a research. 97% of your cancer patients can't afford these drugs. Means even if the drug is available in the market, I am able to write it for only 3% because of the financial toxicity. One good thing in the research is that the research will not introduce a drug directly to the patient. There is a animal research, then it goes into first phase, which is called as a phase 1 trial, drug development, then phase 2, which looks at the toxicity as well as efficacy, and then the drug comes into phase 3. So what largely we practice is phase 3 clinical trials, where the drug is tested in a stepwise manner, the safety is tested. So at least we are not doing harm to the patient. And if those patients, so when the drug comes to the phase 3, largely the drugs is efficacious. Yes, there are failures, but again, as I said, we are capturing a subset of patients who don't have any other options, and where the survival is in the few months, 2 months or 3 months or 6 months. The only option is not to treat or only treat the pain of the patients. By doing so, I feel not only oncologists, the social workers who are involved in the cancer care, the pain management team, the surgeons, the radiation oncologist, we all are working in a team. And the most important part or supporters in this treatment and the treatment of cancer patient is the patient's family. What happens in many a time, patient's family or happens partner says no, this is a cancer. We have seen sad situations where people, even the family members, take a decision on behalf of the patient without involving the patient to take the decision. It is better always to discuss openly all the treatment options in a manner so that these discussions go to an extent that patient takes his own decision. Obviously, saying that cancer is not curable is not right thing. Research, I look at opportunity where the drugs which are very costly, which are again beyond the reach of 97% of my patients, get the opportunity to participate, to get something which can cure the disease. And we have actually seen the immunotherapy is a good example. Is we have celebrities who have received immunotherapy. They should come forward and they should actually participate in awareness of the cancer treatment. So this is very important. The research has a very important value. As I said, after first line or second line treatment, we essentially are left with no other options after apart from giving the pain management or symptomatic care. In such scenario, the Indian scenario, the Ganesh will exactly tell you what percentage of clinical trials are being done, because most of the molecules come from Western world. Most of the clinical trial Indian representation is very less. So our patients are actually deprived of this option of participating in the clinical trial. There are many aspects, maybe our hesitancy, there are myths about the clinical trials, or there are some political aspects or social aspects. One must involve all the stakeholders in this discussion, right from the politicians, policymakers, the Indian governing bodies who give approvals to such kind of treatments. One most important thing for me, I always make an effort, and whenever I get opportunity to discuss with researchers like Ganesh or the pharma companies, how we can bring down the cost of treatment so that majority of my patients should have access. I can personally go to whatever extent, but then again, doing that, I have to leave my clinical practice and go and fight with the policymakers. So that is why we all have to fight this kind of war together. This has many aspects. Treating patients is not the only thing. Getting the drug cost down, accessible, affordable, having access to the research molecule for all my patients is again is in single digits, which we should make sure, we must make sure that 100% of the patients get the opportunity, those who are eligible to participate in clinical research. And that is how I feel we are no in near future, we are seeing that our patients will definitely see cure. And I must say today, fraction of patients, 20 to 30% of the patients are seeing cure, long-term cure in cancer. And that's all. Thank you. I would like to know, take all the questions, and I will divert this question to Ganesh if these are research related. You can type the questions. We can take the questions one by one after the Ganesh finishes the main topic.
Can you introduce Dr. Ganesh?
Yes. Ganesh is a very good friend of mine, and we recently had our batch get together in Pune, and 25 years we finished. No, it's 25 years silver jubilee year when I met Ganesh in Pune BJ Medical College. That was the year 1998. He has been a very bright student. As sir introduced, I used to be leading the college musical band, and Ganesh used to be always a person thinking differently, tangentially. So at present, Ganesh is clinical research professional, qualified. He is qualified in medicine as well as management. He has completed his MBBS from BJ Medical College, Pune, Sassoon Hospital, and done his MBA from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management of Study in Mumbai. So after completing his MBBS, he took a different path. Most of my colleagues continued their medicine, but he was no pathbreaker. No, he chose a different path, and he chose to work in the research field. He joined industry, worked extensively in drug development. He has a significant experience in clinical strategy, inputs, business development, in licensing, out licensing efforts, medical writing. He has written a lot of papers, project coordinator and management, vendor management, extensive practical hands-on management in clinical trials. So you can understand the vast fields where Ganesh is expert. I just treat patient, but Ganesh actually looks, he has eagle's eye on every aspect where I am involved in clinical trials, and he has led the development of new molecules and had interactions with various regulatory agencies. So I mean, he has actually sat down one-to-one to regulatory authorities like FDA and Indian governing body who gives approval to these drugs. He had presented a research abstract at American Society of Clinical Oncology, and he had many publications to his credit. He was instrumental in development of first recombinant. It's a biological drug, anti-D, which is used for Rh negative pregnancies. And that was the first recombinant anti-D in the world, and world's first liposomal doxorubicin approval. So these are to his credit that I as an oncologist understand how significant it is, but he has been involved for development of world's first biologicals, where actually it has brought down the cost of a molecule by 10 times. If that molecule is available at 1 lakh rupees in US, he had put all the efforts to make world's first molecule, which is available at 10,000 rupees. So what I was addressing, that 97% of our patients are not getting access to the newer molecules. He has been instrumental in bringing down the cost so that majority of the patient actually can afford this. So this is about Ganesh, my dear friend, and I'm proud of you, Ganesh. I know you since last 25 years, and very intelligent guy, very intelligent guy. So, and he's very close to me, and we do trekking together. That is one of the other aspects of me as well as Ganesh. Whenever we get time, we make sure that we go near the nature, because nature has a healing power. Nature has a healing power. And over to you, Ganesh. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Bhosale, for such a great overview and being a wonderful researcher as like Ganesh, a pioneer in research, who has helped bringing down the cost of the treatments. And over to Dr. Ganesh Diwekar.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Ganesh.
Sure. Okay, so can I start my presentation? It went on mute.
Please go ahead.
Sure. Okay, fine. Just give me a minute. Yeah. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah. At the outset, I would just like to thank Dr. Antonio for actually giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts, share my learnings, and whatever actually we can just share the thoughts with everyone. It actually helps us in the learning newer and newer things. And I would also like to thank my very close friend Bharat for nice introduction. Actually, whenever when Bharat asked me that, okay, can we just have a discussion, can we have a presentation, I said absolutely fine. First thing, my relationship with Bharat and actually my enthusiasm about sharing the things with others. So I would just like to go for the disclaimer first. Actually, it's there is no conflict of interest from my side for any of the thing, and these are all my independent views, nothing to do with my company or nothing to do with whatever the research work which I actually am carrying out. Okay. So during this presentation, I would be talking about good, bad, and ugly. So this is whatever actually I would be sharing. It's all for just sharing the knowledge or sharing the information with everyone. It's definitely not to say anything wrong about anyone, but it's not only important to know the right things, we also should be knowing about the wrong things. So I may give some examples, but that is just for the learning purposes. And every one of us knows that actually there are positive things, there are negative things. We have to always contribute to the positive things, but we also have to ensure that we should know that what is negative and we should be preventing those negative things. Okay. So today's objective, I will just actually put the objective in some different way. So when we are talking about the ethical issues in cancer research and cancer treatment, so these ethical issues overall in all the therapeutic area go more or less the same. Whatever those specific things are about oncology or cancer, I will definitely talk about it and all. But before that, I just want to put forward a question. Maybe the nature of the webinar is such that actually we can't ask individually the questions, but I would just put forward the question for you to think or to just check it out, that how many of you were having inhibition while taking the COVID-19 vaccine? And to my knowledge, actually, there were many people. So, including, I would say, there are some good friends from the who are medicos asking that, okay, Ganesh, is it safe to take the vaccine? Because medicos were getting the vaccines for the very first time. So, if we are having, if we have a medico, if we are as a clinical research professionals, or we are actually as a research professionals, we are having a question that whether we should be taking the vaccine or not. That is all about what is actually the question about the ethics. So we will talk about it, and towards the end, we should just ensure, I would just try to ensure that to lay down the information from all the perspectives so that this kind of decision making is easier for us. Okay. So for the presentation flow, I will first talk about the basic understanding of clinical trials, why clinical trials are conducted and all, the differences with the medical practice to an extent. And what are the guiding principles? What is actually, how exactly the trial should be conducted or research should be conducted? What are the guiding principles for that? And based on those guiding principles, what are the ethical issues which actually come? So I have bifurcated the things in under 3 different headings. So we'll start with that. So though this is entirely not related to the what is say oncology, this is overall for all the or whatever the whatever drugs which are available or whatever therapeutic area those are available. So why do we conduct a clinical trial, and why do we conduct a clinical trial in a sample of a population? Because practically it is impossible to conduct the trial in the end for the entire population in the world. But at the same time, it is very important to understand that we conduct a trial in sample population. Now, let's take an example of, suppose, let's take example of lung cancer. So lung cancer, there would be actually millions of patients in the world. But when we actually conduct the trial, we conduct the trial in 300 or 500 patients. So the ethics or the importance of conducting the studies in a particular fashion is very high, because based on the results of those hundreds of patients, we would be giving the drug to the millions of patients. So if something is wrong over here, it will get multiplicated by n number of times, because then it is being given to the larger population. So why ethics is important, or why ethics is important in giving the in while the conduct of clinical trials or even in the practice, is because we need to understand that the result of one patient, based on that, or approximately the limited number of patients, we translate it into the millions. It is given to the millions of patients. So from the concept perspective, I just wanted to share this as a concept, that okay, why is it so important to pay or look at the ethics or look at the true conduct of a clinical trial. Now, the definition of a trial or a clinical trial is for the drug, device, or technique. I just wanted to give this particular aspect. It is not necessarily for the drug. It may be for a device, or it may be even for the technique. Uh, there are documents which are actually which are used in the clinical research, and so at what all places the ethics is applicable. So I have actually designed this particular slide long back, and I normally present it explaining that okay, what all things are required and how this delicate balance is maintained. So there is a protocol, there is a clinical trial protocol, which is actually the basis of everything. After that, we prepare certain documents like investigator brochure or the patient information sheet. There is a case record form which is prepared. After that, once the study is conducted, we get the data, the statistical analysis plan is prepared. We get the output. There is a clinical study report, and based on that, the synopsis of the study report is prepared. So this is the delicate balance which is actually put forward on the hope of ethics, on the hope of okay, everything is going right. So we need to maintain this delicate balance, and that's where actually the ethics is very important. Now, this is what Bharat was talking about in clinical research, the number of studies, those are conducted, the number of molecules which come into the market. So if there are 10,000 compounds which are checked out in the laboratory, out of that, 5 compounds hit the clinical trials, and out of that, only 1 compound comes to the market. So there are many products which actually go down in the preclinical phase or in the clinical phase. But having said that, unless and until this entire process is done in a manner in which it would give the results, that is the most critical factor. If the ethics are not applied, if the right research is not conducted, we will not get that one drug. So to get that one drug, so now even Bharat was talking about CAR-T, there is a lot of emphasis that is actually coming. The drug, the pediatric cancers actually got cure rate from 1% to 98%. All this has happened because there is research that has been conducted in an ethical manner, so that there are good drugs which are approved. So from this perspective, it is very important to understand that actually how the funnel works, funnel from the 10,000 compounds to one compound, and what is the importance of that. So if we do not pay attention to the important things during the conduct of clinical trials or in the preclinical, we would be losing that one drug. So we would be losing on the good treatment which would be coming, or it may happen that the bad treatment would come. That is also to be prevented. So it's actually works on both the sides. Whatever is good should come, whatever is bad, it should not come. So that's why actually the ethics is all about. So these were the clinical research guidelines earlier. So obviously this means normally I ask a question that what are you actually seeing? It's actually completely blank, whatever is there. And that's where the clinical research guidelines were. But later on in 1947, first time the Nuremberg Code came. The most important aspect that happened was actually the ICH guidelines coming in 1993. So those got finalized in 1996. In India, Indian GCP came in 2001. The Schedule Y came in 2005, and that's where the paradigm completely changed in India. And still it is evolving, and there is a new drugs and clinical trial rules which came in year 2019. So all these guidelines, everything actually talks about the ethical conduct of a clinical trial and how the trial should be conducted. So the landscape got completely changed over a period of time, and we move towards the transparency. So earlier the things were not known to people, but from there we moved to a greater transparency overall. So I will just go through the definition of GCP, and in that actually we will just get that how exactly ethics is related over here. A standard for a design, conduct, performance, monitoring, auditing, recording, analysis, and reporting. That means everything, practically everything. Provides assurance that the data is reported and results are credible and accurate. That is quality data, and rights, integrity, confidentiality of the trial subjects are protected. That is ethics. So quality data in an ethical manner is actually all about the good clinical practices. So what at the end of the day, what is that matters, or what is that is critical, is we should be generating quality data which is credible, and wherein the rights, integrity, and the confidentiality of the trial subject is protected. That is ethics, and that's all the research is all about. But if you see, ethics forms the major part or the major component in the research part. Okay. Now, with this, I would just say that actually we went through the basic understanding of clinical trials. Now we will come to the guiding principles. Now, why the guiding principles are important is because it is impossible that, okay, there are, to be very frank, today, there are hundreds of studies which are going on in lung cancer, 100 studies going on in breast cancer, hundreds of studies going on in head neck face cancer and all of that. So it is impossible to just pinpoint that, okay, something which is actually there for each and everything. So what the regulatory agencies or the bodies they actually did, they found out the guiding principles rather than putting forward each and everything in so many words, which is impossible to create, impossible to share with people. So they generalize the things actually which would be covering most of the things. So, and in addition to that, whatever is there for a particular study or a particular thing, that is always part of the clinical study during the execution part. So these guiding principles are that way very important. So what are these guiding principles? Those guiding principles are related to the ethics, the scientific validity and integrity of the study, the medical relevance of that, the regulatory and medical legal issues, and the cost. So if something is not related to the medical field, or it is not practice changing, it is something which is even, it is not important, those we should not be entered into those kind of research, because at the end of the day, during conduct of the research, there is something which is actually related to the patient, which is different than their normal practice. So from that perspective, whatever research that is conducted, it should be medically relevant. Second thing, it should be from the regulatory perspective, and the medical legal issues should be taken care of. Now, having said that, now I will just go through. There are 13 principles of ICH GCP, and with these 13 principles, if we conduct the research, if we actually give the treatment to the patients under these principles, absolutely there is no issue, and everything is to be weighted against these 13 principles. So first thing is, the study should be consistent with the GCP and applicable regulatory requirement. Now, what does this mean exactly? So when we say GCP, we saw quality data plus ethics plus the applicable regulatory requirements. So every regulatory agency, so there are regulatory agencies, there is a separate regulatory agency in India, in Europe, in USA, in Brazil, in South Africa, every country. So all these countries, there are whatever the applicable regulatory requirements are, they say that you, for going into the fourth standard, you have to complete first, second, and third standard. You cannot directly jump to the fourth standard. So basically, you may have to first conduct the studies which are with respect to the quality of the molecule. So if it is actually, if the molecule is 500 milligram, there should be some stability data that the product is not going waste within 6 months time frame, or if it is a liquid, that liquid stays like that for a longer duration. So all these regulatory agencies have they put forward their guidelines, and accordingly the clinical data, the preclinical is animal testing, all those things are checked from the study perspective. Next is very important aspect, and which is the ethical aspect for all conduct of all clinical studies, and very important in oncology, is anticipated benefits overweigh risk. Now, if you see the toxicity profile of the chemotherapeutic agent is very high. So if there is a toxicity that is actually getting, which is there, which is also correlated with the mechanism of action of these drugs, the anticipated benefit should be more than the risk. If it is not there, such research should not be conducted. Next is right, safety and welfare of human subjects take priority. It is more important that actually the human subjects are their rights and welfare is taken care of. Available non-clinical clinical info on the product so that the next level of study can be supported. I will go to the next thing. The studies are scientifically sound. Any study which is not scientifically sound cannot be conducted. It is as simple as that. Next is study in compliance with the IRB. IRB is the Institutional Review Board or Ethics Committee approved protocol. Medical care is given by the qualified medical professional. Every person who is conducting the study is qualified by education, training, and experience. There is a freely given informed consent. We will be talking a lot about the informed consent moving forward, but there is a freely given informed consent which is obtained prior to the study participation for every subject. This is one of the most important principle, and informed consent is where the maximum issues or maximum debate happens or maximum issues are noted. The study information is recorded, handled, and stored to allow the accurate reporting, interpretation, and verification. The confidentiality of the subjects is maintained. The investigational product is manufactured, handled, and stored according to GCP, and the procedures are implementing from the to assure the quality. So these are the 13 principles. Now, everywhere, if there is any issue which is there, for example, let's take an example of a thing that we are conducting a clinical trial in a oncology patient, wherein the dose finding is done. Now, unless and until the freely given informed consent is there, the study is scientifically sound, the anticipated benefits are more than risk. All these things would be actually checked so that we can conduct the phase 1 kind of studies, wherein actually it is very, means we don't know whether it will actually work or not, because the efficacy is still a question mark. So from that perspective, all the previous studies data or the preclinical data or the mechanism of action data should support that, okay, this we can conduct the next level of the study. So these guiding principles are checked out with while preparing the protocol at each of the stage, while preparing the documents like CRF, and at the end of the study, it is also checked out, the cross-checked versus the other things. Now, there is one report which was prepared some 1979, which is referred as a Belmont Report. And in the Belmont Report, there are 3 different things or the 3 different guiding principles which are talked about. And these principles are very important from the perspectives of ethics, and this is applicable for all clinical trials. So respect for the persons. So first thing, if we see that is talked about here, is the respect for the person. Now, when we say the Belmont Report was prepared, it is not only for the clinical trials, but it is also related to the medical practice and overall how the patients should be treated. So when we say respect for the persons, the individual should be treated as a autonomous agents, not actually, they should, whatever they should, they may not be considered as a dependent because the doctor is treating the patient or the patient is a part of the clinical trial. It is not that actually the doctor or the patient, the caregivers become the bosses of those patients. It's actually, it's the other way around. There is a more of a liability than the authority which goes to the treating physician and to the research team, that okay, this patient should be taken care of differently. That is what actually Bharat was talking about, that it's not the cancer is not the disease of a, it's individual, it's disease of the family. So all these things actually are to be taken care of when the treatment is administered. Persons with the diminished autonomy are entitled to protection. So there are various ways actually in which the patients are protected. So if individual cancer patient who has failed couple of lines of chemotherapy may not be able to decide whether actually what treatment he or she would like to have. If the disease is so much, the patient may say that no, the pain is so much, I don't want to continue any treatment. But at the same time, as Bharat was saying, that actually some of the lung cancer patients with brain mets, earlier the life expectancy would have been 3 months or 6 months, but these patients are actually living for years. So these things are to be to be informed to the patient. Okay, this is now there are newer treatments. The respect is to be provided to the patient and the information is to be delivered. Next is beneficence, and this is one of the very important factor or the ethical principle in the Belmont report. And what it says, it's actually very simple: do not harm. There shouldn't be any harm practically, wherein we say no harm, it's not possible, but it should be minimize the possible harms and maximize the possible benefits. So this is very important, even in the practice, even in the research, that the benefit should be maximum, the harm should be minimized as far as possible. Then coming to the justice part, who ought to receive the benefits of the research and bear its burden? This question of justice is actually regard to the fairness. The burden and the benefit should be distributed. It's not only the burden which should be given it to the patient, but also from the perspective of the benefits, those benefits should also be checked out. Okay. With this, actually, I will, before completing the guidelines part, I just have one small note, and this is very important. And when I looked at it a few years back, so almost 10-12 years back, when I was doing only oncology clinical trials, and the thing that happened is one of the patient asked the doctor that you are giving treatment as per NCCN guidelines. So why you are giving me why you are asking me to come into the clinical trial rather than giving me the treatment as per the NCCN guidelines? The oncologist actually, he called me up saying that, Ganesh, this is the question. Now I don't know how to answer that. And that is the time I actually read the very, what do you say, fine line in the NCCN guideline. Now, all the cancer treatments which are there, the guidelines which are there are the NCCN guidelines, and there are guidelines for every cancer. There is a different guideline which is there. But if you see here, there is something mentioned as the clinical trials. So I have typed it out for that. And what exactly it states? It states that clinical trials, NCCN believes that the best management of a participant with cancer is in a clinical trial. Participation in clinical trial is especially encouraged. So if you see, this is what it is mentioned on each and every page of NCCN guideline. Then I actually talked to the oncologist. I told him that actually this is the information which is there in the NCCN. We can show it to the patient, and that patient was so happy. Patient said that actually this is what exactly I wanted to know, that if the guideline itself states that actually I should be participating in a research rather than taking a normal treatment, then it's the best thing. As of today, currently 60% of the entire research in the world, with respect to the number of studies as well as the budget for the clinical trials, is in oncology. And I would say that today, whatever the advancement those has happened, in oncology, those are the best advances those has happened. Even I would say for diabetes, other than insulin, there is nothing. For hypertension, there are newer drugs coming out, but actually it's just preventing the thing. But even in cancer, there are actually even cure is possible. So diabetes cure is not possible, hypertension cure is not possible, but for cancer cure is possible. So from the cure perspective, this is what has happened with the treatment guidelines and whatever the ethical principles those were followed. So we have actually looked at all these principles from the, we looked at the why the studies are conducted and all, we looked at the guiding principle, how these guiding principles are important, and now we will go to the ethical issues. So while discussing the ethical issues which are there, so I have actually one slide wherein I would be talking about some experiences. I would be talking about some of the things which I have experienced over a period of so many years, and then I will be going into that particular area. So the discussion related to the access and availability. Now, Bharat talked about the access of our clinical trials, where the trials are accessible, or the treatment access which is there because of the cost and all. So one first important thing is that, do we have the availability of trial information in public domain or on a hospital website? So if at all, there is a cancer patient who stays in Mumbai in area Ghatkopar. Now, for that particular patient, Tata Hospital would be equally at equal distance. Some hospital in Andheri would be at equal distance. Some hospital in Thane may be at equal distance. Now, he cannot go at each of the hospital and understand that whether actually there is a trial which is going on in this particular indication or not. So if we can have that information in public domain, or on the hospitals actually put this information on the website, and I would just say that in the Western world, most of the hospitals actually put all the ongoing studies on their website. So patients actually, whosoever, it will actually also increase the recruitment. It would actually help us overall in terms of completing the studies on time, getting the drugs earlier into the market. But this is from the access and availability perspective, this is one thing which we can look into. Other is Clinical Trial Registry India. So there is a registry. Just give me a second. Since 2009, it is mandatory in India to register each and every clinical trial on Clinical Trial Registry India. So anyone can check out what is the trial and at which centers it is going on. And now legally it has also become very strict that every 3 months there should be update on the trial. So whatever the centers are, those actually should be there on the Clinical Trial Registry India. Now, next thing is patient travel reimbursement. Now, let's take an example of a patients with stage 3 metastatic colorectal cancer. Now, that patient, it is very hard for the patient to move it alone, to go to the hospital alone. There has to be some caregiver along with the patient. Now, in a clinical trial, patient travel reimbursement is given to the patients. Now, if the travel reimbursement is given only for the patient, then the caregiver, it would be difficult for the caregiver to come to the hospital, or they might be incurring some cost, and patient may say, today I will not go to the hospital because the caregiver is not available, or there is not that much of finances which are there for the caregiver to come. So in that particular case, the ethics committee has to look into what is the type of cancer that is studied in a clinical trial, and what should be the travel reimbursement that should be given. It should be rational, and ethics committee among themselves can discuss and check it out and share that what should be the reimbursement cost. I would also like to share, actually, we were conducting one of the study at Tata Hospital, and in that, one of the patient used to come from Jharkhand, and we want that patient, whenever he used to come, he used to spend a lot of money on the train part. So we took the we went to ethics committee, asked that actually we want to reimburse the patient on the actuals, because we don't want to lose that patient data in future, that patient's visits and whatever the treatment that patient should be getting at a scheduled interval, it should be given. So from that perspective, we actually went to ethics committee and gotten that approval from the ethics committee. So all these things are possible and should be checked out. So from the access and availability perspective, the ethical principles say that the patient cannot become a subject or a participant without access to a clinical trial. So when the patient participates in a clinical trial, he becomes participant or a subject. So whatever the barriers which are there for the patient to becoming the participant, which are like language, geographic, financial, educational, uh, ethnic minority status, the study design, objectives, are all to be taken care of during the course of the study. So study design can be taken care of at the time of protocol writing. The objectives are related to that. The language, geographic, financial, educational, during the conduct of the clinical study, the ethics committee has to look into all these things. Having the information on the website of the hospital will help in the geographic access, because then the patient would upfront know which hospital I should go to if I want to participate in this particular clinical study, wherein the drug is not available in the market and might be available after 10 years. But if I participate in a clinical trial, I can get it today. So these are also these barriers are also categorized as protocol related, patient related, and investigator related, and these are actually all these are taken care of. I will just go to the next thing, that is the intent and the purpose. So overall, among the physicians, there is a uh, thought that actually in a clinical trial, there is a lot of documentation that is required. But to be very frank, I disagree on this particular aspect. Maybe we will take Bharat's opinion also on this. So the documentation in a trial and practice is actually the same. And this is where this documentation, which is the trial, which is actually from the perspective of the trial, if that is maintained to that extent, it helps a lot. It is also important that the time spent with the patient. Now, I know Bharat, and actually how he treats patients and the time actually he spent. Giving good time to the patient heals the half of the disease. And in this particular case, it is very important to actually exactly spend good time with the patient in practice, as well as actually when the informed consent is to be discussed and the signature is to be obtained from the patient. The informed consent documentation, the whole narrative of the informed consent, that patient came at this time, this was informed to the patient, then patient agreed to participate in a clinical study, these are the questions which patient asked, these are the responses which were given. All this documentation is actually very much required, so that in future the entire scene or entire thing can be recreated only based on the documentation, so that it gives us a confidence that the quality data has been generated. Okay. Now, from the intent and purpose perspective, one more thing actually with respect to oncology, I would share that this was, I think, year 2011 or 2012, and that time we were conducting some oncology clinical trials, and the one question that was asked was, we said that we will give the 6 cycles of chemotherapy in the protocol. But you also might have heard that there are 6 cycles of chemotherapy which are given normally in the practice. But I couldn't find out anywhere documented that why 6 cycles of chemotherapy are given. So normally in a clinical trial, the treatment is given till disease progression or occurrence of unacceptable toxicity, and that's why it is beneficial. So nowadays, in most of now the treatments are also changed. So those treatments are also given actually for the more than 6 cycles. Okay. So next is actually frequency of the scans. So there is a criteria called as RECIST, so response evaluation criteria for solid tumors. Now, as per response evaluation criteria for solid tumor, which is RECIST, the scan is to be done after every alternate cycle. So if the 3 week is if the cycle period, 21 days cycle for chemotherapy for most of the drugs, then every 6 weeks the scan is done in clinical trial. In practice, it differs, though investigators may take a call or the treating physicians may take a call, but that's why it is mentioned that the trial, there is actually the frequency is better, so their treatment is better. Now coming to the intent and purpose with respect to other than the other information. So medical practice, it refers to the interventions that are designed solely to enhance the well-being. As opposed to that, the research designates the activity which is for to test the hypothesis, permit conclusions. So there is a difference in that. And the knowledge and the disparity between the physician and the patient differs a lot in oncology. That's where it is important to understand this medical practice and research over here. The knowledge of the patient with respect to oncology is obviously limited when it comes to the patient. Also, the second important aspect, the fear that is generated by the new disease, and which is a life-threatening disease. So that is totally very different from the patient perspective, and that's where actually Bharat said it's not the disease of the patient, it's disease of the family. So from that perspective, in a medical practice, the physician may just go for the well-being, but in research, there would be a hypothesis that will be there. What are the things are to be checked out, which should be checked. But overall, in the both the things, the careful and deliberative communication regarding the trial objective or even the treatment objectives in medical practice is very much important, and it is a very important ethical aspect. Now, many patients may look at actually as a good to have kind of thing, that the doctor has given us a good time, they have explained all the things to us and all that. From that perspective, it's absolutely fine. But if it is actually, it is not only that one or particular aspect, but even the patient feels it good, and there is the disease also gets controlled to an extent, because the patient's actually the body language talks the positive language. So these are the things with respect to the ethical aspects when during the practice and research are to be looked into. The next important aspect is what are the roles and responsibilities of the IRB and the patient. So when we say actually IRB, that's the Institutional Ethics Committee. What is the role of Institutional Ethics Committee during the course of the clinical study? And how the conflict of interest is to be managed. Now, what if the investigator is part of the IRB? Now, if the investigator is doing the study, he is also part of IRB, but in that particular case, he cannot vote when the study is being deliberated. So he may provide the information, but he's voting or he doesn't have the voting right because of the conflict of interest. Second case, if we just take it, the member secretary is related to the investigator. Now, under these cases, actually, it happens that if the member secretary is related to the investigator, then this conflict of interest is to be disclosed upfront. It should be informed to the ethics committee. These are the thing. Some other person to be checked as a member secretary for that particular project, and then only the discussion should happen. Now, I would just come to the constitution of IRB, and then we will go back to the IRB and ethics committee and patient related things. So when we say the quorum, these are the 5 members which should be part of the every meeting. And these are clinician, the legal expert, the lay person, social scientist, and basic medical scientist. Now, if we just see the background of these 5 people, it's totally different. The clinician is from clinical side, legal is from the law side. The lay person who doesn't understand everything, he doesn't understand anything from the clinical research, but from the humanitarian ground, whatever the things are, the lay person should ask. The social scientist from the social perspective, and basic medical from the research perspective. So all these, the guidelines have only defined these 5 people as a quorum for the ethics committee. Now, unless and until these 5 people are there, all the ethical aspects are looked into by 5 different dimensions, the study is not considered as approved. So this is very important aspect from the ethics perspective, that unless and until these 5 people approve the study in one particular meeting, it is not considered as approved. Important aspect over here, the legal expert has to see all the things from the legal perspective. The lay person has to ask the questions from the patient and from the humanitarian ground perspective. If it says that actually the travel reimbursement would be 200 rupees, he should ask a question: what if will you be paying extra if the patient is coming from the far? There are certain visits wherein the blood collection is at very repetitive things. Okay, what all things, is it absolutely mandatory? If it is not mandatory, what all things are to be done? So all these questions has to be asked by these 5 multi-dimensional people, so that the ethics and the ethical principles are preserved. Other thing is, there has to be one female member. This is the new rule as per the New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. This is a thing. And also 50% of the members should from the outside the institute. Now, having said that, all these things are from the IRB perspective, they have to look into all these things. Now, what is from the patient perspective? From the patient perspective, patient has to follow the protocol as per whatever that has been informed to him. That's the first thing. And second, and the more important thing is that the patient has to disclose all the information. If he has faced any adverse event, he has to inform that. If there was something patient felt that actually I'm not feeling good, so he took another medication, then obviously they have to inform that. So I have seen a particular case wherein the patient participated in a clinical trial. That trial was for the pancreatic cancer, and that patient was actually also taking simultaneously some Ayurvedic medicine. Now we would say that okay, Ayurvedic medicine, there is no data or all those things, but there is some treatment that patient is taking. Now under all these things, actually it would eventually happen that it is not permitted. So patient has to be truthful, and patient has to provide all the required information to the treating physician. The IRB is responsible for reviewing and evaluating the informed consent documents too, and any material which is there. So whatever, even the training material which is there or any other material which is there, everything the IRB is responsible for. The IRB has no role if the patient is being treated as a part of a clinical practice. Okay. Patient who has become participant in the clinical research has an additional safety net because of the regulatory and scientific oversight. That's why NCCN guidelines also promote that patient should be treated in a clinical trial. Now, these are the aspects from the perspective of the ethical perspectives from the ethics committee. Now, let's look at from other perspective. No, sorry, there is a small spelling error over here. So from the trial design perspective, now first and foremost thing which is there is the trial scientifically sound. Is it meeting all the guidelines? Is the dose the first, if it is the first in human study in oncology, is it meeting the required things as per the guidelines? The preclinical and the clinical data that is available prior to next phase of the study is adequate as per the guidelines. If the placebo is done or placebo is to be used in a clinical trial in oncology, is it permitted? No, it's not permitted. So if we just look at the first studies which are there, so initially placebo was permitted. Later on, the guideline came in oncology because it's not possible to check it out if the placebo are not permitted. Next is, if the studies are, we are doing the studies with the tyrosine kinase inhibitors, which are actually not cytotoxic, is the placebo permitted? So this question, actually even the regulatory agencies find it difficult to answer this question as of today. So next thing we will go to that from the perspective of study design and from the scientific sides of the study. So what all things are to be mentioned in the protocol. So I would just like to share one thing with you. This incident happened actually almost 14-15 years back. That was a phase one. I would say actually that was the first phase one oncology study which we were doing. And in a phase one oncology study, there are the doses which are in the there is a dose escalation. So earlier there is X milligram per meter square, then there is the X plus or 1.5 times the X. Then it is 2.5 times the X. So there is a dose escalation which is there. And all this information is to be mentioned into the informed consent document. So one of the patient asked the treating physician, what is the dose I am getting? I was so happy that actually such a patient is asking this kind of question, so that we take so much of effort in preparing the protocol, preparing the informed consent, translating the informed consent, ensuring that each and everything in the informed consent is correct, it's logical. All that thing actually got paid off with that one particular question from the patient, that what is the study dose. That means the patient has gone through the entire informed consent, understood everything, and actually gone ahead with this. Other thing is the most audit findings. So most of the audit findings come on the informed consent. So that's why earlier I said that informed consent is very, very, very critical. All the things, whatever that has been discussed with the patient, whatever that has happened, all those things has to be documented, so that that scene can be recreated even in future, to say that whatever the data that has been generated is the quality data. Okay, so from the informed consent perspective, informed consent is the most prominent of the ethical concerns which is there. So everything that is there in the informed consent has to be checked thoroughly. Now, let me just give you one very funny example of how the things actually happen. So this is again, the incident happened almost 10 plus years back, and we were checking out the translation of informed consent. Now the informed consent has to be translated and back translated. So first, the informed consent, if we prepare it in English, it is to be translated in vernacular languages like Marathi, Hindi, Gujarati, Telugu, Tamil, whatever that language that is required at that particular hospital. And then this English, this Marathi or vernacular language translation has to be back translated in English and to be cross-checked with the original English, so that to check it out, the meaning is not lost anywhere. Okay, so we were just checking out one Marathi translation, and we thought that actually, because we can read and write Marathi, let's at least see that actually how the translation is done. If it is Telugu, Tamil, definitely we were not no, that's not our mother tongue, or we have not learned that, we are not able to check it. But at least I said, let's check it out if it is what is there written in Marathi. And what was written as there are chemotherapy cycles. So the translation of cycle in the Marathi ICF was chakra. So which is actually like a circle. So, but this is not, the patients do understand cycle. Patients do not understand chakra. So chemotherapy chakra, they will say actually what exactly this is. So these kind of things, actually, I would say that unless and until we give the right information to the patient, the informed consent becomes the most important. Now, if the patient is having, actually patient gets that inhibition that actually this informed consent is not giving me the right information, I should not participate in a clinical study, that is a loss. So informed consent is actually a very important and a critical document. It is actually, informed consent comes under the principle of autonomy. Autonomy means actually whatever for that particular patient is, everything is to be preserved. So under the principle of autonomy, the physician researcher assess the capacity and the liberty of the patient or the participant, and allow time for the deliberation and answering the questions. So this is actually most important thing. So whatever the questions are, those are to be discussed to the satisfaction of the patient, and all those things are to be documented. So that is informed consent is all about. Now there is an informed consent for trial, there is an informed consent for the practice. So the rules and regulation for informed consent at both the places are the same. The intent of informed consent is to assure that the patient participation in the research study, and they are made aware of the aims, methods, anticipated benefits, potential harms, the processes, the procedures of the study participation, how many times they have to come to the hospital, how much blood draw would be there at each of the visit, what all investigations would be done, how the treatment would be administered, is there any issue that may happen with the treatment. All these things are to be explained to the last dot to the patient as a part of informed consent, and this is actually the most important thing in the ethical aspects of the study conduct. Now next is from the confidentiality perspective. So each and everything in a clinical trial is absolutely confidential. We cannot disclose the patient's name. We cannot disclose a lot of information. So I would just like to share one particular thing over here, so that from the research perspective. So the communication that goes from the sponsors to the ethics committee is routed via investigator. A sponsor or a CRO is a contract research organization, cannot write directly to the ethics committee. They cannot write to the ethics committee. They have to write it to the investigator. Investigator forwards it to the ethics committee. So that because they should not threaten the ethics committee anytime, or there shouldn't be any direct communication between these two parties, because ethics committee is the most sensitive in terms of the ethical aspects of the study. Next is patient details are kept confidential. In any of the scenario, the confidentiality is not broken. From the confidentiality perspective, next part, each clinical trial participant is identified by a subject number which is unique and the initials. So the name of the patient is never disclosed. The patient identity, in whatsoever fashion, is not revealed in any case of even the publication of the study result, or even in the clinical study report which is there. So the confidentiality is the next important ethical aspect. Now let's come to, from the studies perspective, some of the things like the genetic studies. Now genetic studies are very getting very common in oncology. So what all things actually are applicable when it comes to genetic studies? So there are various approvals, those are required. So there are specific regulatory approvals, specific ethics committee approvals which are required. The ethics committee members has to ask what all things would be done on the genomic studies, why is it required, how it would be done, how it would be presented, is there any risk to the participants in case they actually participate in a genomic studies. So there are different guidelines for the conduct of a genomic studies, and these are becoming very important nowadays, because if the genetic information of the Indian population goes outside India for some other purpose, it's actually not good overall from India. Second is roles and responsibilities of ethics committee. Each and every team member of the ethics committee is responsible for the genetic studies. They can ask all the information about the reason why it is done, how it is done, where it would be done, how it will be reported, everything, and whether there is a separate informed consent that is taken for the genetic studies. Okay, so there are two possibilities from the genetic studies perspective, that a participant is enrolling in a genetic study, or offering a specimen wherein the larger data is being created. In both the things, the process and the procedure to be followed in these circumstances may or may not be included in the informed consent and the document. So whatever that is to be followed has to be there in the informed consent to an extent. If it is for the offering, for the only offering, then it is treated differently. But this information should be given to the ethics committee. Patient should be aware that, okay, for what the informed consent is being taken, for what the informed consent is not being taken. Next is for the conflict of interest. So let's take an example that the investigator who is participating in a clinical study is on the advisory board of the company. If that is the case, there is a clear-cut conflict of interest. or if the investigator is holding the significant equity stake in the company. So nowadays, US FDA asks for a form which is actually called as Form 3454, wherein actually it's a financial disclosure. So it's not only from the investigator perspective, investigator's entire family, or even the entire study team doesn't have any financial conflict of interest. So all these things are actually come to the critical aspects when it comes to the ethical things. So these are various ethical things which are there, right from the informed consent to the scientific aspect of the study, to the conflict of interest, the ethics committee, the genomic studies, if those are there, or from the perspective of the scientific aspects which are revealed or which are not to be revealed. All these things actually are important. But if we just look at the guiding principles, actually all these ethical principles and all those things, those are mostly important from the perspective of the guiding principles. So other one point which I missed for the conflict of interest is potential to undermine the public trust. If there is a conflict of interest, the patients actually may not feel that actually the trust factor, and it becomes actually the legal issue from that perspective. Okay. Now, I would just, before closing, I would just share one more important thing which is related to the trial-related injury and which is applicable only in India. Okay, so this legislation is limited to India only. So what is there is that if there is a trial-related injury, there is a compensation that is given. Now, when this particular rule came into in India, there was actually it was not that refined. And when we had the discussion with many investigators and some of the ethics committee members during the various conferences and the forums, that time it came that it should not be there, because then the patient may participate in a study because of the compensation, or they would be getting financial benefit. In none of the clinical study, the patient is paid for the participation in a clinical study. So if we are giving the compensation, it is not a right approach. So from that perspective, the regulations, actually we had discussion even with the Indian regulators with respect to what all things can be done, and they change it to that. But now, even now, it is actually, we have to look into the positive and negative aspects, negative implications of this compensation for the trial related injury. Now, in conclusion, which actually I was just trying to summarize earlier. So whatever the things are, and whatever those challenges which are there from the ethical aspects, what all things which are to be looked into, everything at the end of the day, ethics is about the self-consciousness. Now, one important thing which actually I learned during my early days is the ethics is actually, or the GCP is like a rubber band. It's up to you how much you want to stretch it. But it's also important that what is your self-consciousness that is allowing you. And it is to be evaluated by each stakeholder. That is the reason there are multiple stakeholders which are involved, multiple stakeholders from the various aspects who are there. So from that perspective, it comes that, okay, the legal aspects are taken care of, the clinical aspects, those are taken care of, the layperson's aspect, those are taken care of, the social scientists or the medical scientists, everyone is taking care of their aspects, and the guidelines overall here are very supportive. So with this, I will just conclude the presentation. And if there are question answers, we'll be happy to discuss that. Bharat, you want to take it forward?
Wonderful deliberation, Dr. Ganesh. Very simple, as you said earlier, at the understanding level of the lay people and medical people, you know. Otherwise, sometimes it's so difficult to understand what the researchers say, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you, Ganesh. A difficult topic even for the researchers. You made very simple. If there are any questions, Ganesh is there to answer the ethics part. If there are any questions related to the cancer treatment, I would be happy to answer those.
Can I ask Dr. Ganesh, why you said placebo is not permitted? What are the reasons placebo is not permitted? Because placebo is one of the thing in research, right? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello,
Can you hear me?
Ganesh. Hello.
Dr. Ganesh?
I think there is his photo is hanged. Let me check in. Sir, what was your question?
He said, first, only 6 cycles of chemotherapy. That is related. That is for you. Why only 6? Why not 4? Why not 2? Why not more? Second part is placebo is not permitted in cancer research. What is the cause?
No, I think no. I don't know exactly what context was that point was raised. Placebo. First, I would like to take the first question. Why is the 6 cycles? So these are the questions which comes from the patients. So 6 cycles is for majority of the diseases. But now there are different sets of chemotherapy given, like 4 followed by weekly 12. In pediatric cancers, we give chemotherapy for 2 years. So those are not 6 cycles. So whenever patient goes to the document, then they have time to ask all those questions. Why 6 cycle? Why not 4? Why not 12? Why not continuously? So largely solid tumors. I'm saying solid tumors. So for example, breast cancer, the cycles were used to be 6 only. Nowadays, it's not 6, it is 8. For lymphoma, there used to be 6 cycles. There are 6 cycles of chemotherapy, but there are low-grade lymphomas where you give 6 cycles and after that you give maintenance every 2 monthly for 2 years. So such kind of questions patients should ask after going to the documents. I think he wanted to say that thing. Placebo, whenever we treat multiply treated cancer patient and when they don't have any standard of care there, suppose a patient has exhausted all lines of treatment and the only standard of care is no treatment and just give painkillers, if there is a supportive care treatment, nutritional treatment, and you want to bring out a new research molecule. So half of the patients are distributed to standard of care, which is there is no treatment, there is no chemotherapy, and half of the patients will receive the research molecule. So suppose the research molecule is a tablet, then you need to have a tablet form of placebo in the standard arm, and the research molecule will go to the experimental arm. If the research molecule is an injection, say a 1-hour injection or a 24-hour injection, so you need to have a placebo, similar placebo, which is injected as a sterile water or anything else over a period of 1 hour or 24 hours. So placebo has to be there in a clinical trial. Otherwise, it will not be a blinded trial. The researcher and the interpreter or the patient will come to know they are in the standard arm or the research arm. And then there will be an analysis bias. You are obviously going to have a bias in terms of the distribution, randomization, as well as interpretation and statistical analysis of the trial. So placebo is very, very important. Placebo is very, very. Sometimes we see there are trials where placebo arm is doing better.
But
so means your intervention is damaging. So in that case, there is something called as an early analysis. So what was he mentioning? Audit. There is an independent data committee monitoring, and that comes very early in the clinical trial. Set number of patients, we have to call upon the independent data analysis committee, and if such kind of analysis is there, then they can ask you to terminate the clinical trial in the early phase. So these points are very critical in terms of doing research as well as the clinical trial.
No, ethically, when you know for sure that placebo is not going to, normal saline is not going to help the patient, can you give this?
So placebo is not going to have any side effects. So in
only
that
because
what
about the effect?
Yes. So what I was talking to you is I was taking an example of multiple lines of treatment where there is no standard treatment. So for the sake of so suppose I am doing a clinical trial and I have randomized patients into 2 arms. And in one arm, I'm giving just suppose say paracetamol, and in the other arm, I'm giving a research molecule. Then I am very well biased that I know that this patient, A patient is getting the research molecule and the B patient is not getting the research molecules. So there can be bias as well as many errors on the researcher's part as well as the patient's part. The patient also knows that he is not getting the so here you are not harming the patient by giving the placebo. Placebo is not, it is a standard of care. In that particular setting, there is no standard of care or there is no research molecule. There is no standard guideline to give chemotherapy in that. The survival is only 2 months. Everybody is aware of that. But if I am biased by giving the drug to A and not to B. That to avoid that is very, very important. There are many steps: randomization, stratification, the power of the test. See, these are very, in detail. There are multiple factors which can make a research trial ethical as well as follows the good clinical practice. So it's a part of that. So it is obviously not wrong to give, because placebo is not going to have any side effects. There are certain combination chemotherapy trials where one agent is used, which is a standard of care. So say gemcitabine, and you want to add one more drug to gemcitabine, say gemcitabine and carboplatin. In that case, the other arm will be receiving only gemcitabine. You don't know adding carboplatin is going to help or not. There is going to be a preclinical or clinical research which says that carboplatin may help you a subset of patient. In that case, you have to have a carboplatin placebo in the standard arm, where the standard of care is only gemcitabine. Suppose in pancreatic cancer or any other cancer, like Dr. Gupta has done a trial of adding carboplatin in a triple negative breast cancer patients, where he showed below 50 adding carboplatin actually improves the survival. So the standard arm has not received carboplatin. That has received only the drug, single drug without carboplatin, which is paclitaxel and anthracyclines. So they have to give a placebo in that particular arm.
Okay. Ganesh, you have any answer, any light on that?
Yeah, sure. So maybe actually, there's when I completed the presentation, some issue happened with the net, so I now joined with the mobile. I missed that answering that question. So I would just actually share what do you say, the 2-3 things when it comes to the placebo part. So whatever actually the Bharat was saying, like if it is there is a standard of care which is there, and in addition to that you are adding something, so placebo is permitted over there. But if we just look at that, the study wherein there is it's a early stage breast cancer patient, and we are comparing paclitaxel, and now we have gotten a new what do you say, new taxane, let's say taxane X. Now this taxane X is to be checked out versus whether it is actually having any effect in the breast cancer or not. We cannot use the placebo, because placebo effect is not known in oncology. Like if we just take an example of, suppose, other therapeutic areas, like take example of chronic idiopathic urticaria. So their placebo effect is known. So wherever placebo effect is known, you can actually use placebo. If placebo effect is not known, then we cannot use placebo. But if the standard of care is not there, so for what example which Bharat was given, that these patients are hardly having a life expectancy of 2 months or 3 months. There is no standard of care. There is no treatment to these patients. Then placebo can be given along with the newer treatment that can be given. Now, if the combination therapy is to be given, so for example, like paclitaxel plus carboplatin or gemcitabine plus carboplatin, and the standard of care currently is only gemcitabine, carboplatin is to be added as an add-on. In that particular case, placebo is permitted.
Okay.
So it is a study design, means actually maybe.
Yeah, so sometimes the ethics committee, the scientific person can suggest and discuss with the PI whether it is required. Most of the placebos are the placebo arm is basically, most of the time it is blinded, right, Ganesh?
Yes.
If your trial is unblinded or it is an open label, I think, Ganesh, in that case, everybody knows that the placebo is not required, right? Because everybody knows that what arm they are in. In that case, placebo is not required, to simply say it is. In a blinded and, as I said, trials, randomized trials, you have to give, otherwise there will not be a blinding. If you label, I'm doing a blinded trial where no principal investigator, the researcher, analyzer, and patient all are unaware about what molecules they are getting, then you have to have placebo. And the moment we unblind because of the severe toxicity, we have to inform the ethics committee as well as the conducting authority that this event has happened, and we have to unblind the trial and tell the patient that he is actually receiving a placebo or the research molecule. Yes, Ganesh?
Yes. That is very much required. That unblinding has to be informed.
Dr. Ganesh, Suppose, say, during trial phase in the research, death occurs in the patient or severe side effects occur, then how it is dealt with ethically?
Sir, actually, for this particular case, if there is a death or a serious adverse event, so there is a definition which is there in the GCP, that what is called as a serious adverse event. So if it is a life-threatening death or there is a congenital anomaly, then there are guidelines. So the investigator has to inform the a serious adverse event to the regulatory agency that is in Delhi and to the sponsor within 24 hours. Then they have to inform about the whatever the additional data, because within 24 hours they may not have any data. They just have to inform that the serious adverse event has happened. Within 15 days they have to provide entire due analysis report to the sponsor as well as to the ethics committee and to the to regulatory agency, that is DCGI. And then after that the ethics committee checks out. Ethics committee has a 90 days time period to check it out that okay, whether this is drug related, not drug related, if any additional data that is required, and accordingly they inform it to the regulatory agency that whether the compensation in this particular case is required or not required. So ethics committee plays very important role in the analysis of the serious adverse events.
So this happened very much during the vaccine, no? Some vaccine gave more toxic effects and some other vaccine did not give toxic effects. And people were really in a query which vaccine to take.
I think no, sir. Vaccine and the entire COVID was I think that is a totally different topic, and it may take one day to answer that query because still things are unanswered, and the way COVID killed so many people, we feel that no vaccine has saved, but at the same time, if you think ethically, whether no the molecule which has come in a very short period of time, whether it is no really effective, but we have actually seen the pandemic getting controlled also. I have my own reservations about safety as well as efficacy. Every drug is going to have side effects, and if you save thousands of lives, no, that accident is going to happen, or on that occasion you are going to have some side effects. So are the side effects with the cancer drugs, and we do explain all the side effects. Is there no cancer drugs are also killing the tumor at the same time? There are long-term side effects happening at the DNA level, molecular level. Those patients who survive for 2-3 decades, less than 1% of them do develop secondary cancers as a result of the mutations happening because of the drug. But at the same time, we have to understand thousands and lakhs of lives are saved. Again, as I said, COVID vaccine, it is very early. We don't know what is going to be the long-term safety and this thing. And people are, it's good that people are asking questions, and that is what expected in a clinical, ethical trial, the trial which is done in an ethical and real way, that the patient as well as the ethics committee gets the opportunity to scrutinize, criticize at each step. And that is the way forward, so that the safety of the patient is at is paramount importance. It is at the apex of the pyramid, nothing else.
Sharon, any questions on the board? Sharon?
Yes, doctor, there are questions.
Can you read out, please?
What happens if after all the documentation, etc., the patient suddenly refuses to go for the treatment? Question by Suzanne Muchani.
So, see, unless and until a patient, if he or she is 18 years plus. So for kids below 18 years or minors, the consent is to be signed by the parents. I will not go into the details of consenting. Ganesh will answer that. So if the patient is really not willing for signing the consent, no one in the world has the authority to force the drug administration, not in the clinical trial, but in the routine practice also. That's why many a time patient comes to me that don't tell anything to the patient that he has a cancer. It's like, you have to tell the patient. Sometimes we are facing a curative disease, and just because the name is cancer, they don't want to reveal. For example, Ewing sarcoma, where the cure rate is 70 to 80%. And if you don't tell the patient knows that he is going to Tata Hospital, which is a cancer hospital, and the relative tells the doctor that don't tell the patient that you have cancer. This is a common scenario. Then the patient will feel they are bringing me to the cancer hospital. That means I have only 6 months. That negative thinking only will kill the patient, would kill the patient rather than no. So let's face the reality. You have still a 70 to 80% chance of cure, and these are the medications, and there are the side effects. If you complete this treatment, there is a 70 to 80% probability there is a chance of cure. You are actually creating a trouble, no, or hurt getting this treatment with a curative intent to the patient. So it is very important to have a clear discussion. Sometime in a setting, people come to us and tell that let's tell us that exactly how much time is there. We have, and patient ask open questions. You have to discuss these scenarios because people have their own way of looking at the life, and they can take actually a very good decision for themselves. Even if a patient, elderly patient says, I don't want to take therapy, I would sit with them and discuss all the points, and I would be happy not giving them treatment. It's not a forcible decision. You have to respect the individual decision of the patient. But the decision has to be taken after proper discussion.
Next question.
Question by Sebastian Coutinho. Amazing wisdom sharing, doctor. As an oncologist, you would have seen and studied clinical studies around us. We see many people coming and promoting alkaline water benefits or magnetic bed towards the betterness of cancer. Do such things really work for the person or as an alternative to chemo?
It has, as Ganesh is there who can take anything which has been studied in a research way with randomization, with whatever steps Ganesh said. I am more than happy to accept any pathy, not only allopathy. It is be it homeopathy, be it Ayurvedic, or is a naturopathy. You have to have a level of evidence. Even in cancer treatment, if I tell one treatment, I tell the patient whether my treatment is based on a research in large number of patients or only one patient or a case study or a rare scenario. There are many things, not only alkaline water or magnetic field, yoga. See, something which is not toxic and not commercially promoted just to get benefit. I said, go and get that treatment, because I have told you that my treatment is not going to work because I have exhausted with all my allopathic treatment. If you want to go to some alternative treatment, don't unnecessarily spend the money unless and until there is a good evidence, because many patients go and take the alternative treatment. What happens if it is happening in the palliative setting? Somebody should not unnecessarily exploit the patient. That is one thing. Second thing, these people then try these things on the patient in early stages. I will tell you one example. There was a breast cancer patient who has a 2-centimeter lump in the breast. And the treatment could have been only surgery, no radiation and no chemotherapy, because it was a ERPR strongly positive stage 1 patient. After reading the word cancer and telling that there is a surgery which can take out the part of the breast, that patient went to some place near Vapi and came exactly 1.5 or 2.5 years after that with a fungating breast wound, and the breast tumor had already gone to liver and bones and lung. The treatment was applying a cow dung on the breast. So now such kind of the things should not be promoted. You need to know. And the fact is that 70 to 80% of all the cancer patients are already taking some alternative treatment without telling their doctor. And majority of the time, the side effects are because of those alternative treatment. I have seen it many times. It's not only uneducated people. I had treated one young teen guy who was a son of a very big railway officer. And while I have been treating him for curable malignancy, where the cure rate was 95% precisely, and he got cured also after that. On a follow-up scan, his liver enzymes were going very up, like 300 and 400. Out of curiosity, I had done these liver enzymes and we had done the sonography. My radiologist looked at the liver and immediately called me. Then this guy was taking some leaf extract, which was and in Mumbai city, 4 different cases of same disease have been reported in the same month. So I always ask my patient, if you are taking anything apart from my treatment, please reveal those treatment to me. I would be happy to go into detail and advise you. So those things are very, very important. If you are if something like alkaline water has been always been asked question to me, I don't have a high level of evidence. If it is not toxic or not damaging, a magnetic field again, unless and until there is no side effect, it's better you go ahead and take it in a palliative setting, not in a curative setting.
What's the cost of immunotherapy in
Yeah,
India?
if I can just add, sorry, if I can
Yes,
just add,
yes.
because this is the question which actually comes many times, and Bharat answered it from the oncologist perspective. I will just answer it from the research perspective. We value data. These treatments do not this whatever that is having, actually Bharat said this, whatever that is having data, everything is welcome. Unfortunately, these people, they do not have anything, and whatever they come back with is actually, it's literally one patient, someone, and this is all hearsay. So when there is no documentation of anything, and so this kind of treatments doesn't have any value if they are not having any data. I would say, even I'm not talking about only the whatever the other pathies which are there. Even we should not be using the drugs which have shown or which have not shown benefit in a clinical trial. No documentation, no benefit should not be used. And one of the important ethical aspect which I talked about in that, and which Bharat said, that the patient, what is important from the patient perspective in a clinical trial or in any setting, is truthfulness to whatever they are doing. Sorry, please continue. Thanks.
What's the cost of immunotherapy in India? Is it available in all clinics and hospitals?
So now there are 3 or 4 drugs available. The cost is in lakhs per cycle. So it's, if you calculate at least a 1 year's cost, it is somewhere beyond the reach of the majority, and it costs you at least to go for 1 year's therapy is 20 lakhs plus.
Dr. Bhosale, last week or beginning of this week, there was a big write-up on Siddharth Mukherjee, the Emperor of Maladies, on his T cells. What is the future of this?
So it's not the future. I told you, some of the treatment is in public domain now. CAR-T is again a T cell primary antigen, which is now one of my friend Rahul Purwar from the IIT has done a phase 1 trial in Tata Hospital, and these patients of leukemia and lymphoma who actually don't have any curable treatment, few of them, I'm not saying 100%, few of them are seeing the cure, and this is still the Indian made first kind of cellular therapy. Now there are many vaccines will come in the future. In the past, the vaccines have failed, but looking at the success of cellular therapy, there are other therapies. Cellular therapy is natural cell killer, NK cells, dendritic cell therapies, which have been tried in the past in the setting of clinical trials, but none of the vaccine or cellular therapy has been as successful as the CAR-T therapy. So I must say the future is bright for cellular therapies.
Okay, great.
Last question, Doctor. Which book, his first year resident student, which book?
Yeah, I'll forward my email ID. The students can write to me. I will guide them to read what all the books. It is very important to spend time with the patient in the ward. Books we have been reading throughout our life. The social media is these youngsters have better access to the social media, but if you spend, my one advice to, not advice, my whatever I learned, spend maximum time with the patient.
You learn a lot from there.
They are the best teachers. Even how they walk, you can diagnose. So they are the best teachers for anyone.
Dr. Ganesh, how often cloned animals are used for research nowadays?
So animals are there. Animals use is there. So clonal animals, it's not actually normal. What do you say? The rat or the mice. These are the animals which are used. Higher animals are used for any higher things only. But just to share with everyone, actually, I missed to share that part. Even there are animal ethics committees which are there.
Because recently the monoclonal antibody cetuximab has been approved by FDA for anti-cancer drug agent for lung cancers. Can you comment on that?
Actually, when you say the approvals, those approvals are required. Yeah.
Yes, I have to log in for another meeting. So okay. I'll take 1 minute to thanks. Thank you, sir. Thank you, the organizers.
We must thank you. for taking time despite
Thank you,
being so
thank you,
busy, so
thank
many
you.
webinars and all. All right.
No. For
Thank
you,
you very
anytime.
much indeed.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time for us.
Let's
and
have a.
education.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Ganesh? You were...
Yes. So actually, all these approvals are basically based on whatever the data that has been generated. Now, there are also cases which are there wherein FDA has given the approval earlier, and because, like for example, they have given certain approvals based on the phase 2 study data, but the phase 3 was not positive, and they have to withdraw the approval. Such things has also happened. So these approvals and whatever those are actually very dynamic things. But if it is the question is related to the preclinical, coming to the clinical, there are set rules and regulations wherein so much of preclinical data is required to go ahead with a particular clinical things. But FDA is also thinking or the curtailing the requirement of overall preclinical data.
The last question from this, nowadays there is a trend to grow a particular organ in vitro, right? And then they see the effects of the drug on that organ with tumor or tumor induced. What is the future of this?
So actually, this is very much required. This is actually part and parcel, because normally in preclinical studies, if we want to see the anti-cancer effect of a particular drug, they have to induce the tumor within the animals, and after that, actually they try to give the drugs and see the benefit of that. So this is very much required and would be part and parcel of the drug development process.
Okay. All right. Anything else left, Karen?
No, doctor. Questions done.
Thank you, Ganesh. You really gave us a lot of information about your experience in research, and like Lord Ganesha, the God of knowledge and wisdom, you gave us your wisdom. We appreciate very much from the trustees of the Biomedical Ethics Center. Sincere thanks and gratitude. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, sir. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
And
Thank you,
we
Dr.
thank
Ganesh.
all the students who attended the webinar, and of course Sharon to arrange all this.
Yeah. Thank you, doctor.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you for
everyone.
logging
Thank
in.
you.